Hey guys, tonight we journey back, way back, to ancient Persia, where the sun rises over dry hills and the air smells like roasted dates, wet earth, and the faintest whisper of cumin on the breeze. You're not just anyone. You're a miner, noble with just enough land to earn respect, not quite enough power to dodge taxes, and far too many embroidered garments for your own good. You've just been invited, no, summoned, for a weekend retreat at a luxury desert camp owned by someone much richer than you, which means two things. You absolutely have to go, and you absolutely must look like you packed casually when... In fact, you've been prepping like it's a royal inspection. The courtyard is humming. Not loud exactly, but there's a buzz. The kind that hovers in the early morning before a big trip, where servants shuffle quickly but quietly, and camels clear their throats with throaty growls that sound mildly insulting. You're standing barefoot on cool stone tiles, sipping the last of your spiced goat's milk tea, watching the household unfurl into controlled chaos. Your steward is losing his mind over the packing list. Mehrzad, your bodyguard, is barking orders at a poor teenage stable boy who clearly didn't realize how heavy a folding bath tent could be. And Shireen, your cousin, your rival, your inexplicably glowing travel companion, is already adjusting her hair combs with a smugness usually reserved for people who own their own irrigation systems. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're tuning in from some faraway corner of the modern world, drop your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where you all are drifting off from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You glance down at your own belongings, meticulously laid out on a faded indigo blanket. There's your second-best linen robe, embroidered with tiny lions that no one ever sees unless they stare directly at your hip. A bronze mirror polished so aggressively last night, you can see 3 layers of insecurity in your reflection. And of course, the prayer scroll, tucked safely inside a hollowed-out pomegranate. Don't ask. It's a family tradition. The list in your steward's hand includes all the sensible items. 2 water skins per person, dried apricots, emergency lentils, an extra turban, and something called a wind cloth, which you later learn is just a fancy word for the thing you'll wish you hadn't forgotten when sand is in your teeth. But let's be honest, you're not going to follow the list. You've added at least 3 extra robes, a tiny vial of night-blooming jasmine oil, and your lucky dice carved from camel bone, because what if there's gambling? Historians still argue whether these noble retreats were a symbol of decadence, or simply the only way to escape the political backbiting of city life for a few days. Some say these trips were filled with business deals and subtle power plays over tea. Others suggest they were glorified picnics with very expensive towels. What we know for sure is people overpacked. And yes, even back then, they absolutely argued about how many pillows was too many. Speaking of pillows, yours is stuffed with reeds and scented with lavender leaves. It's also tied with a red ribbon that Mehrzad insists is for visibility, though you're fairly certain it's just because he can't tell your pillow apart from his anymore. The camels are being loaded now. One of them, your personal mount, has been nicknamed Soft Thunder. It's a lie. He's the loudest camel in the known world. He also hates you. Every time you mount him, he lets out a groan so long and dramatic it might qualify as poetry. Still, he's fast, steady, and doesn't spit unless provoked. Much. The sun climbs higher, painting the clay walls of your estate a warm terracotta. You wrap your robe tighter and head toward the gate where the caravan is assembling. It's a modest group by noble standards. 2 camels for you, 1 for Mehrzad and his weaponry, 1 donkey for general hauling, and an ox cart for Shireen's essentials. These include, but are not limited to, a folding chaise lounge, 3 musicians who look very tired already, and most mysteriously, a single, large, extremely disinterested goose in a traveling crate. No one knows why the goose is coming. Not even the goose. With everything nearly ready, your steward approaches. He asks if you remembered the tribute gift for your host. Your stomach drops. Tribute? Oh, right. That tiny formality where you're supposed to bring something elegant, yet humble, rare but not suspiciously expensive. You pat your robe pockets. Nothing. Your pouch has some dried figs and half a poem. Maybe the goose can be the tribute? You glance at Shireen. She's already glaring. As your caravan lurches forward, the familiar sound of hooves, wheels, and camel complaints rises into the warming air. You pass through the tall gate, adorned with blue and gold tiles in the shape of mythical griffins, and wave goodbye to your estate. Already looking smaller, quieter, and strangely less chaotic now that you're leaving it behind. The open desert welcomes you with its signature dry wind and that inexplicable scent that's not quite dust, not quite spice, but definitely ancient. You pull your scarf a little tighter around your neck and settle into the gentle sway of the camel, letting your thoughts wander to the days ahead. There will be heat and sand and awkward small talk with a satrap's cousin who once insulted. Your wine choices. But there will also be stars and music, and maybe, if the bath tent holds up, a decent soak under a moonlit sky. You're off, packed for comfort, performance, and at least 2 levels of unnecessary luxury. What could possibly go wrong? So, you've just passed the final row of fig trees that marks the edge of your estate. Goodbye, routine. Goodbye, slightly overcooked breakfast porridge. Ahead lies the open expanse of Persian semi-desert, a mix of rocky terrain, golden dunes, and the occasional wadi full of suspiciously enthusiastic frogs. It's early morning, but already the air has that dry crunch to it, like it's been toasted in a giant clay oven, which is to say, perfect weather for existential reflection and regretting your packing decisions. Speaking of which, let's talk about your fellow traveler, Shireen. Specifically, let's talk about how she has packed for this trip, as though you are traveling not into the wilderness but into a Persian version of a luxury brochure. Her portion of the caravan groans under the weight of her necessities. 6 lacquered baskets of silk robes, color-coded by mood, 2 delicate jars of powdered turquoise for casual eye enhancement, a small bronze mirror mounted on an adjustable frame, and the pièce de résistance, her portable bath tent, complete with drainable flooring. Historians debate whether these bath tents were an actual staple among Persian nobles, or whether they were more of an urban elite fantasy. Archaeological evidence is sketchy. No bath tents have survived, obviously, but some wall carvings suggest that high-status individuals did indeed bring portable bathing vessels on long trips, particularly if water sources were available nearby. Of course, they probably didn't also bring a massage stool and someone trained in palm divination by shoulder tension, which Shireen insists is real. You, by contrast, have tried to keep things minimalist, which is to say, you've limited yourself to only 3 robes instead of 6, just 1 satchel of travel jewelry, mostly bronze, 1 silver anklet you pretend isn't tarnished, and your writing box. Yes, you travel with a writing box. You're cultured. It's got ink, a stylus, and a scroll of half-finished philosophical thoughts you're secretly hoping to read aloud if conversation dries up. Unfortunately, you also packed a small ceramic flask of fermented pomegranate wine that has, against your best hopes, cracked open inside your linen bundle. You won't notice this until lunchtime, when you go to change and discover that all 3 of your robes now smell faintly like regret and overripe fruit. Still, the mood in the caravan is light. Mirzad keeps a watchful eye out, his heavy bronze, sword sheathed in a worn leather scabbard with tiny tassels, his one concession to fashion. Occasionally, he mutters something about keeping pace and watches the horizon like he's waiting for a sandstorm to jump out and surprise him. The donkeys are doing better than expected, especially Daria, your newest one. She seems to enjoy the rhythm of the road and responds to your humming with an occasional satisfied snort. Or maybe she's allergic to your humming. It's hard to tell with donkeys. What's clear is that everyone, including the camels, is acutely aware of the load Shireen's section is carrying. One camel, forced to lug her collection of aromatherapy stones, is already limping slightly out of protest. Another has developed a dramatic head tilt, which Mirzad believes is feigned, but you think might be a genuine cry for help. Around midday, the caravan pauses for its first break. There's a rocky outcrop that offers just enough shade to set up a midday snack station. You're handed a small plate, dried apricots, salted almonds, and a wedge of goat cheese that's managed to remain only slightly gooey. Not bad, all things considered. Shireen insists on unrolling a rug. Not just any rug, a dyed woolen marvel depicting the story of King Cyrus's legendary lion hunt. She sits on it with theatrical poise, sipping her chilled fig syrup from a reed cup cooled by a portable clay canteen she's buried in the sand. You try to look unimpressed. Really, you do. But the cup has tiny etched dolphins on it. While the others eat, you take a moment to check your packing again. It's only the first leg of the journey, and already you're starting to see cracks in your plan. First, you didn't pack enough linen. Not for this heat. Your current robe is absorbing sweat like a sponge at a hammam. Second, you forgot the herbal sleeping sachet your aunt made you. The one that smells like lavender and very old pine needles. And third, and perhaps most urgent, you've brought no shade hat. You improvise with a scarf. It works, sort of. It also makes you look vaguely like a wandering prophet, or someone trying too hard to look like one. Historians still argue whether travelers of your status would have packed light out of practicality or heavy out of status anxiety. Some ancient Persian tablets suggest lists of recommended items for journeys of various lengths. These include everything from sandals to spiced vinegar to a pipe for heating the feet, which you're pretty sure is just a poetic way of describing a cozy footbath. Other scholars argue that most packing decisions came down to personal flair and whose house you were trying to outdo. In your case, it's definitely about not being outdone by Shireen. Not after last year's Oasis picnic, where she unveiled a reed fan operated by a very bored servant and casually forgot to bring enough cups, so everyone had to take turns drinking from a small onyx bowl she conveniently owned. This year, you have a secret weapon, a pair of collapsible bronze, wind chimes, delicately tuned, that you plan to hang outside your tent at night. Not only will they make you look mystically in touch with the elements, but they also produce a sound you find inexplicably relaxing. Unless it's windy, in which case they'll sound like tiny gremlins wrestling. You pack up after lunch, tuck your fig pits into the waist satchel. Yes, you have one. Classy travelers always do. And prepare to remount. The sun is higher now, and the camel's patience lower. But the desert is opening up in front of you, wide and bright and pulsing. With the rhythm of a long weekend you're determined to make memorable, and hopefully less goose-scented. Your camel lurches forward with a sigh so deep it could be mistaken for a retired philosopher reflecting on lost love. You wobble slightly in the saddle, still not entirely sure if you've mastered the graceful, noble sway, or if you just look like someone trying not to spill invisible tea. The sun is now bright enough to paint sharp shadows across the landscape, and the desert is starting to show off its texture. Jagged rocks, low shrubs shaped like grumpy sages, and the distant shimmer of heat waves that play tricks on your depth. Perception. It's time to talk snacks. Travel food in ancient Persia was a mix of survival smarts and culinary creativity. You didn't just grab a handful of barley and call it a day. No, there were dried fruits, pressed cakes, spiced nuts, smoked meats, if you could afford them, and a particularly divisive item, preserved yogurt leather. Yes, it sounds like something you'd find at the bottom of a neglected tent bag, but it was real, and it was oddly functional. You'd nibble it slowly, hoping the tartness would distract from the fact that it had been sitting in a goatskin pouch for 3 days. today's. Midday snack is actually not bad. You reach into your own ration sack and pull out a tightly wrapped date cake. It's sweet, chewy, and packed with enough honey to be considered both food and hair product. Shireen, of course, unwraps a paper-thin sesame biscuit with all the delicacy of someone auditioning to be a high priestess of snackery. Her musicians, seated behind her, munch on roasted chickpeas, tossing them into the air like bean-based acrobats. Meanwhile, Mehrzad's idea of a treat is a strip of dried meat. So leathery, he has to soften it by briefly dunking it in his water skin. He chews with the solemn concentration of a man reciting military oaths internally. You, of course, are stuck in the middle, between elegance and practicality. So naturally, you pull out your own secret stash, a small jar of pickled turnips with cumin, a gift from your aunt. They smell assertive, but in the right way, like a well-meaning dinner guest who won't stop telling stories. Historians believe that many Persian travelers brought similar pickled goods for long trips, fermented vegetables and herbs that could survive heat and time. The vinegar acted as a preservative and, in many cases, a mild digestive aid. It also served as a kind of culinary flex. If your pickles didn't make people flinch, were you even traveling? The real challenge, though, was keeping everything from spoiling. Your jar of pickled turnips is tightly sealed with wax. You remember sealing it yourself 2 days ago while listening to your cousin rave about the medicinal properties of coriander seeds. She claimed they could prevent nausea, sunstroke, and political embarrassment. You didn't argue, but you did. Add an extra pinch to your jar just in case. Preserving food in this climate was no joke. Ancient Persian travelers relied heavily on drying, salting, and fermenting. Grapes became raisins, milk became cheese, and bread became whatever you could scrape together and flatten against a hot stone until it stopped looking like regret. Flatbreads were common travel companions, wrapped in cloth, tied with string, and often shared like tiny edible treaties at rest stops. Speaking of which, you're starting to notice the slight rustling sound that signals the entire caravan is beginning to crave a proper stop. The camels grunt, the donkeys lag. Even the goose, riding in smug silence, gives a soft honk that seems to say, "Is this the snack break? Are we there yet?" Mehrzad pulls up beside you and gestures toward a small depression in the land ahead. It's a dry riverbed shaded on one side by a natural rock shelf, perfect for a longer break. You signal to the others, and soon the whole procession slows to a rumbling halt. You dismount with care. Soft thunder groans but doesn't resist. Small victories. You roll out your sitting mat, a gift from a former tutor woven with little patterns that resemble constellations, and settle into the warm, dusty comfort of the break spot. You sip water, careful not to gulp, and pull out another date. It's sticky and sweet, and for a moment the heat seems to pull back. Shireen approaches, holding a tiny brass container of dried rose petals. "Would you like one?" she asks. Like it's a test. You accept because you're polite and because you're curious. The rose petals are dry, papery, and fragrant. They taste faintly of memories and expensive tea. She smiles like she's just won something. You smile back like you've just swallowed an entire rose bush. Historians still argue whether such delicacies were common among mid-level nobles or reserved for royalty. Some say rose petals were only eaten ceremonially, others believe they were used liberally, sometimes even stuffed into pockets, for luck and scent. You suspect both are true, depending on whether someone wanted to impress a guest or keep their armpits smelling like a garden. Your break is short. The sun is still rising and the best travel hours are before noon. You pack your things, dust off your robe, and remount Soft Thunder, who lets out a snort that nearly knocks over a passing. Lizard, the caravan stirs back to life, creaking, sighing, rustling, and crunching forward through the golden quiet. As you settle in again, you think about tonight's meal. You're already calculating what might still be edible by then. The pickled turnips will survive. The cheese? Maybe. The fig cakes? probably long gone accidentally shared with the musicians who always look one meal away from revolution. You tuck the date cake back into its pouch, lean into the camel's rhythm, and let the warm air carry you forward, belly full and mildly rose-flavored. The desert is flattening out now, transforming into a wide golden plain with only the occasional scrubby plant to remind you that life somehow still happens out here. The wind picks up, not fierce, just steady, like a bored but insistent hairdresser. You adjust your scarf again, this time wrapping it under your chin and over your head in a way that feels somewhere between mysterious traveler and very warm dumpling. And then it hits you. Your feet hurt. Of course they do. You're wearing sandals. And not just any sandals. Your travel sandals, which you bought from a vendor who swore up and down they were desert approved. You now suspect he meant the desert was where shoes went to die. The straps are made of finely worked leather, dyed a warm ochre color and lined with something that's either sheep wool or extremely confident moss. The soles, however, are thin, fashionable, sure, but about as protective as a stern look. Every time you step down during a short walk, you feel the individual personalities of each pebble. Shireen naturally has opted for reed-soled sandals with padded insoles. You know this because she made a big deal about mentioning the padding, twice. While looking directly at your feet. Ancient Persians had options when it came to footwear, but they weren't all created equal. Common folk often went barefoot or wore crude sandals woven from palm fibers or reeds. Nobles, on the other hand, indulged in leather footwear stitched with thread made from sinew, or, if you were especially fancy, dyed flax. Some sandals were, even lined with soft wool for longer journeys, though historians still argue whether this was a widespread trend or just something bored aristocrats wrote poetry about. You pause during a short rest break to inspect the damage. 2 blisters, one of them shaped vaguely like the Zoroastrian symbol for fire, which feels ironic. You consider wrapping your feet with linen strips, an old trick your tutor once mentioned during a lecture on battlefield logistics. But you didn't. Bring extra linen strips. You brought 3 extra anklets and a wax-sealed letter from someone you haven't spoken to in years. Helpful. Merzad notices you wincing and tosses you a scrap of goatskin. Wrap them, he says, as if you should have known this from birth. You do. Sort of. You just hoped it wouldn't come to this. Sitting cross-legged on a smooth stone, you wrap your feet with surprising finesse. Goatskin doesn't breathe, but it cushions nicely. The sandals fit more snugly now, secure, almost respectable. You stand and take a few test steps. No more blisters. Just the gentle sensation of traveling with 2 very confused goats on your feet. Of course, you're not the only one reconsidering footwear. One of Shireen's musicians, a young man named Farzan, whose primary skills are drumming and tragic, glances, has clearly lost a sandal to the shifting sands. He's limping dramatically, clutching a reed in one hand like it's both a walking stick and a prop for his personal opera of despair. Shireen sighs and offers him one of her spares. From the bath tent basket, naturally, you consider asking if she has any spare wool socks too, just for research purposes. The group presses on. The wind grows stronger. Dust starts to kick up around your legs, and suddenly, your footwear situation doesn't seem so dire. The goatskin helps block the sting of the sand, and your scarf keeps most of it out of your mouth. Shireen's goose, however, is less pleased. It honks in protest, fluffing its feathers and pacing its crate like a noble in exile. You try to ignore it, mostly because it looks like it's plotting something. As the sun climbs higher, your feet begin to sweat inside their makeshift wrapping. It's not unpleasant, just damp. You start to miss your old bedroom slippers, simple felt creations gifted by a cousin who'd never left the city but swore they were road-tested. They weren't. You wore them once in the garden, and they absorbed so much dew they nearly became a pond. Still, you think of them fondly now, the way you might think of an old friend who never asked too many questions and always smelled faintly, of lavender and old bread. You wonder what people did before sandals, before the invention of proper soles. Did they just hop? Wrap their feet in bark? Historians can't agree. Some argue early Persians developed sandals by adapting techniques from Mesopotamia, where people used woven plant fibers to shield against sharp terrain. Others suggest a homegrown invention, perhaps inspired by watching goats hop nimbly across rocks and thinking, yes, that, but more fashionable. You share your theory with Merzad, who grunts and mutters something about goat foot envy. You can't tell if he's joking, possibly neither can he. At long last, the caravan comes to another resting spot, not an oasis yet, but a small rise overlooking a dry river channel. It's cooler here, with the faintest shade cast by a cluster of stunted tamarisk trees. The breeze is steady, kind. You dismount and peel off your sandals, inspecting your goatskin wraps. They're holding up. Your feet, miraculously, aren't bleeding. Progress. You stretch out on a rug laid over the sandy ground. The sun filters through the leaves above, casting flickering patterns over your arms. Someone passes you a cup of cool barley water. It's earthy, strange, but oddly satisfying. Your feet throb, but gently now, as if thanking you for your very late, very minimal effort. Tomorrow, you'll rethink your travel footwear. Maybe, but for now, you close your eyes, listen to the wind tease the tamarisk branches, and savor the sensation of not stepping on anything sharp for at least 10 minutes. By the time the sun has lazily dragged itself down from its throne of noon, the temperature shifts, just enough to remind you that you're not quite at the worst part of the day, but the desert still holds opinions. The heat now settles like a soft, judgmental blanket across your shoulders. Your scarf, damp with effort, clings to your neck. Even the camels are quieter, their groans more philosophical than irritated. That's when it becomes clear. It's time to reapply the oils. You reach into your personal grooming pouch, which, if you're honest, has been expanding over the years like an overambitious empire. Inside is a modest selection: a small alabaster vial of rose oil, a thumb-sized chunk of sandalwood balm, and a soft brush made from goat hair. Real goat hair, not the cheap donkey blend Shireen uses, despite what she claims. This is your secret weapon, your defense against heat, dryness, and smelling like a tired shoe. You dab the rose oil behind your ears, on your wrists, and under your nose. The effect is immediate and blissfully familiar. For a moment, you forget about your blistered feet and your limited robe rotation. You smell like civility, like cool palace corridors and silk pillows. You smell like you have your life together. Ancient Persian travelers didn't mess around when it came to personal fragrance. According to some records, written and otherwise, they brought whole kits of oils and balms, often infused with herbs, flowers, or tree resins. Rose oil was especially prized, though only those with money or powerful connections could afford the good stuff. Lesser nobles, like yourself, might receive small quantities as gifts or through black market trades with overly perfumed scribes. There's also a heated scholarly debate over whether scent in travel was purely for comfort or served religious and social functions. Some suggest that applying oil was part of ritual purification, especially before entering sacred spaces. Others argue it was just a clever way to avoid smelling like fear and donkey sweat. Either way, you are now the best smelling person in a 20 camel radius. That's worth celebrating. You're not alone in your olfactory efforts either. Shireen has a small chest devoted entirely to perfumes. It opens like a shrine, tiny compartments of dried myrtle, lavender sachets, and a phial of ambergris she guards like it's the last drop of magic in the world. She's also employed a part-time fan boy, literally a boy who walks beside her with a small palm frond fan, wafting her fragrance ahead of her like a scented prophecy. You tried hiring him once. He said you smelled resolute. You let him go. Merzad, of course, claims to use no scent. I bathe in discipline, he says. But you've seen him sneak a dab of cedar oil onto his wrist before entering formal meetings. It's the same wrist he holds near his sword hilt. Coincidence? Probably not, but it's not just about how you smell, it's about how you present. Scent was a signifier of class, health, and readiness. It told the world, I may be riding through sandstorms, but I remain composed. It also told insects, please go elsewhere. Speaking of insects, one has decided to die heroically in your sandal. You flick it away and reapply a dab of sandalwood balm to your ankles, muttering a small, improvised blessing. In the distance, the goose honks in. Approval or disdain. The two are indistinguishable in goose dialect. As the caravan pushes forward again, you feel lighter somehow. Not physically. You still have a pouch full of dried figs that clinks when you walk, but emotionally. You smell human again, maybe even attractive. The wind carries your scent ahead of you, hopefully not into the face of that one camel who seems to resent all forms of joy. You notice Shireen's musicians have begun playing a soft tune, a blend of reed flute and hand drum. It's slow, meandering, like a melody trying to remember where it left its shoes. You sway gently in rhythm, from the back of your camel, basking in the moment. It's hot, yes, but you're scented, shaded by a sliver of cloud, and traveling with people who, despite everything, haven't tied you to a cactus. You pass a pair of desert foxes resting in the shadow of a dune. They watch your group pass, ears twitching, noses twitching more. You wonder if they smell your rose oil and assume you're a deity. For a few quiet minutes, you're at peace. The heat, the dust, the goose-related tension, they blur into the background. You're just one more scented noble gliding over the sands like a slightly confused but very moisturized mirage. And then, of course, the balm melts. Yes, it was inevitable. The sandalwood balm, stored in your belt pouch, has reached its melting point. You feel it first as a warm trickle near your hip, then as a slow betrayal down your leg. You do what any reasonable person would do. You pretend nothing is happening. You straighten your back, lift your chin, and ride forward, exuding grace and sandalwood like a statue caught in a heat wave. Eventually, you'll stop and clean it up. Maybe you'll tell people it was intentional, some kind of ancient Persian leg therapy involving essential oils and sun exposure. Historians still argue whether such incidents were common among travelers. There's little written evidence, but one poem from the era does mention a prince whose lotion fled his jar and scented the sky for hours. You like to think you're that prince now. The caravan moves on. The air is thick with dust, music, and the mingling perfumes of nobles and beasts alike. It's absurd. It's oddly beautiful. It's ancient Persia on the move. And you? You smell amazing. The afternoon sun settles into a mellow gold, softening its earlier aggression. Shadows stretch longer across the dunes, and your camel's gait slows to a more reflective plod. It's the hour when conversations trail off, and everyone stares into the middle distance, wondering why they packed 4 kinds of nut paste but no second scarf. It's also when your saddle begins to feel more like a polite torture device, reminding you that comfort is a fleeting mirage. You shift your weight again and glance over at the decorative saddlebag slung across your camel's side. Hand-stitched, gold-threaded, and totally unnecessary, but it looks good, very good. In fact, the entire setup was curated for this trip. Leather-dyed indigo and trimmed with tiny bronze bells that ring just softly enough to suggest wealth without screaming. In ancient Persia, saddlebags weren't just luggage. They were status statements. Embroidered satchels, gold tassels, and even ivory clasps signaled how important you were, or at least how important you hoped people thought you were. Some noble families had their family seals woven into the fabric. Others preferred elaborate motifs of lions, birds, or, in your case, a stylized date palm that looks suspiciously like a nervous chicken. Artistic license. You rummage through the bag now, checking your most prized travel items. Let's see. One ivory comb with missing teeth, still functional. A small reed flute you haven't touched since last No Ruse. A sealed jar of honeyed, almonds wrapped in linen, a scroll of dream omens, because you once had a vision of a three-legged donkey and haven't stopped worrying about it. And your best towel. Yes, your best towel. Not just any towel. This one is cotton, striped with maroon and cream and embroidered at the edge with a repeating pattern of dancing elephants. A gift from a friend in Susa who told you, dead serious, if you ever need to impress someone during a wash break, this is the one. You believed her. In the noble circles of Persia, even towels had reputations. Some were perfumed with dried rose petals and stored in lacquered boxes. Others were made with imported cotton from India, so soft they were described in poems as clouds that obey. Historians still debate how widespread this textile luxury was, but court records from Darius the Raz's reign do mention towel inventories in palace treasuries. Imagine being the guy who had to count towels for a living. You refold your towel and retuck it with pride. Nearby, Shireen is going through her own accessories, selecting the right necklace for transitional light. It's a series of lapis lazuli beads that somehow match her eyes, her robe, and the camel blanket. You suspect sorcery, or relentless planning. Merzad, of course, has brought exactly one accessory, a whetstone. It hangs from his belt like a subtle warning. His saddlebags are practical to the point of despair. Flint, extra rations, a spare, knife, a water skin shaped like a bored boar. He raises an eyebrow as you refluff your towel for the 5th time. It's important, you explain. He grunts, but doesn't disagree. It's not all towels and trinkets, though. Hidden in a side pocket, you've packed something even more precious, a letter. Folded carefully, sealed with wax, stamped by your family crest. You haven't decided whether to deliver it yet. It's meant for the host of this desert weekend, a bey. Powerful satrap with a love of poetry and a tendency to quote himself in casual conversation. The letter is part flattery, part subtle reminder that your family still exists and still owns land, even if half of it floods every spring. There's also a tiny sachet of crushed saffron sewn into the corner of your saddlebag. Not for cooking, though. You could. No, this one is purely for sniffing. Saffron was prized as a luxury spice and a mild relaxant, used in perfumes, teas, and even eye drops, though that sounds suspicious. Ancient Persian nobles carried it in sachets for both aroma and soft bragging rights. You occasionally press it to your nose, close your eyes, and pretend you're someone who owns a vineyard. Just as you're tucking the sachet away, disaster strikes. The bells on your saddlebag catch a low branch, one of the scraggly, sun-dried desert trees whose sole purpose seems to be ruining your day, and rip. One entire side of the bag opens like a surprised fish. Out tumbles your ivory comb, your honeyed almonds, and worst of all, your embroidered towel. You dismount with all the elegance of a collapsing tripod and rush to gather the items. The towel lands face down in the sand. Your heart breaks a little. Merzad watches this unfold and, to his credit, only chuckles softly. He does not make a towel joke. That's how you know he respects you. You brush off the towel, delicately, reverently, and refold it as if preparing it for royal inspection. The comb is chipped but fine. The almonds, well, they now contain approximately 14% desert. You consider eating one anyway. You do. It's crunchy, possibly spiritual. Historians still argue whether noble travelers had backup towels for emergencies. Like this. There's a whole school of thought claiming the truly elite always carried a ceremonial towel and a utility towel. You suspect that's just modern historians projecting their own anxieties onto ancient luggage. Either way, you now have one slightly compromised towel and a much stronger appreciation for knots. Merzad helps retie your saddlebag with silent efficiency. You both remount without further incident. though you do notice the goose watching you with barely concealed glee. You adjust your robe, pat the towel for luck, and ride on. You may be dusty, you may be down one snack, but by the gods, you look like a noble, and sometimes that's all that matters. You've barely resettled into your saddle when the sound starts. Faint at first, a soft rhythm like the distant thrum of wings. It's not your heartbeat. It's not the wind. It's flutes? Yes, it's flutes. Plural. Somewhere behind you. The musical portion of your caravan has decided now is the time for a traveling jam session. The melody is slow, sinuous, rising like heat from the sand and curling through the air toward your ears. It's joined by a gentle tapping, hand drum, you think, and then the distant, almost wheezy drone of a reed pipe that sounds suspiciously like someone's trying to charm a very unimpressed snake. You glance back. There they are, the three musicians Shireen brought with her. They ride with a kind of weary elegance, balancing their instruments as though they were born in the saddle. The flutist, narrow-eyed and perpetually serene, plays without once looking at the notes. Probably because there are no notes. Just instinct, memory, and a lifetime of being told to play something appropriate while nobles chew fig paste. Bringing musicians on the road wasn't uncommon in ancient Persia, at least not among those who could afford it. Music wasn't just for entertainment. It was a form of ritual, a balm against boredom, and, according to at least one very enthusiastic poet, a spiritual weapon against existential dread. Of course, historians still argue whether these musicians were treated as honored artists or glorified background noise. Your guess, a little of both. Shireen treats hers like mood accessories. She even gives them ambiance themes to play, based on the terrain. Right now they're in dusty expanse with mystical undertones. Last week, she had them perform a short suite called Sunset Over Rice, which involved a single note held for an uncomfortably long time while she ate alone under a parasol. You, meanwhile, never thought to bring your own musicians. Mostly because your budget is one camel and a very sarcastic donkey, but also because Merzad has a strict no-loot policy after an incident involving an overzealous bard and a poorly timed battle ballad. Still, you can't deny it's pleasant. The music blends with the creak of leather, the hiss of shifting sand, and the occasional disgruntled honk from the goose. It lifts the mood, gives the journey a rhythm beyond the slow plodding of hooves. Even your camel seems to walk with a little more swing in its hips. You pull out your own reed flute, mostly for fun. It's been a while. You bought it at a bazaar 3 years ago from a man who claimed it had blessed tones and was once played in the presence of a satrap's daughter. You strongly suspect it was made last month by his cousin, but the story was charming. UT. Play a note. It's not terrible. Merzad winces. You play another. Shireen glances over, raising an eyebrow in a way that somehow communicates both condescension and begrudging amusement. You smile like you meant to be bad at it. Music in this heat acts like a light breeze for the soul. You're sweating through your robe, sure, but now you're sweating to a beat. You even start to hum along, softly, a bit off-key, but with conviction. The others don't join you, probably because they respect art, or fear your commitment. There's something comforting in the repetition. The drum beat, the camel's sway, the tiny jingle of your repaired saddlebag bells. You could almost fall asleep if it weren't for the whole actively navigating a semi-arid climate on a tall animal thing. The flutist begins a new tune. This one's slow, haunting, almost lullaby-like. You think it might be an old folk song about a shepherd who falls in love with a tree, or maybe it's about taxes. Most old songs are, once you really listen. You remember a line your tutor once told you. A noble is not truly traveling until their soul has hummed once and sighed twice. You thought it was poetry. Turns out it was just travel fatigue. Even Merzad, who normally treats music like it's an airborne illness, seems to relax a little. His shoulders drop. He loosens his grip on the reins. You almost expect him to start whistling. He doesn't. But he does close his eyes for a moment. A small miracle. The landscape rolls on. You pass a half-buried stone marker, possibly ancient, possibly just a forgotten milestone. The music follows, threading through the dunes, wrapping around your thoughts. You start composing lyrics in your head for the current melody. Oh, noble friend with towel so bold, your almonds spilled, your sandals old. You decide not to sing it aloud. Yet, historians still puzzle over the actual music styles of this era. The instruments are known, lutes, flutes, drums, and lyres, but the melodies, lost to time. We can guess. We can extrapolate from later Persian traditions. But ultimately, what you're hearing now, the way the music bounces off sand, sky, and the backs of animals, is something ephemeral. A moment. A feeling. And isn't that the point? You play another few notes on your reed flute. This time, no one flinches. Even the goose looks vaguely contemplative. You pocket the flute and breathe in. The air is dry, scented faintly with sandalwood and something spicy, perhaps Shireen's incense, or maybe just the collective wish that the sun would take a nap, the Music continues behind you, gentle, dreamlike. You ride on, and for the first time today, you feel not just like a traveler, but like part of a slow-moving symphony drifting across the ancient world. The sun begins its descent, finally. It hasn't set yet, but it's less aggressive now, more of a polite dinner guest than the midday tyrant it was earlier. The light softens into amber, and the wind shifts slightly cooler, carrying with it the faint, dusty smell of dry herbs and animal hair. You feel the caravan start to slow, some instinctual agreement among beasts and humans alike that now is the time. It's camp setup hour. Now, when you hear the words, camping in the desert, your modern brain might conjure images of lightweight tents, foldable chairs, maybe a campfire and someone burning lentils in a titanium pan. Ancient Persian noble camping? Not quite the same. Think less sleeping under the stars, and more mobile estate with layered rugs, embroidered shade canopies, and at least one argument over pillow hierarchy. You dismount with the grace of someone whose thighs gave up around hour 3. Your feet touch ground, grateful but also deeply resentful. Merzad says nothing but hands you your staff. It's decorative, sure, but it helps you stand with a certain nobility. You pretend not to lean on it too hard. The servants begin unpacking immediately. Poles are set, rugs unrolled, stakes hammered into the sand with tools that look suspiciously like oversized spoons. Your tent is modest in size, but grand in detail. The fabric is dyed a deep blue, designed to echo the twilight sky. Gold thread outlines the edges, not so much because you're rich, but because your great-aunt gifted it to you with the words, "If you ever look poor in public, I will haunt you." The whole thing goes up in under 30 minutes. Efficiency, yes, but also muscle memory. This isn't your first desert rodeo. Inside your tent, 2 rugs cross at an angle, forming an X of hospitality. Your mattress, a rolled reed mat wrapped in wool, is fluffed and ready. Your bronze oil lamp is hung from the tent pole, its chain twinkling like a promise. You add your towel, folded precisely, to the pillow stack. Victory. Shireen's tent, of course, is 3 times the size. It takes twice the time and 4 times the complaining to set up. But once it's done, it looks like a fabric palace. Side wings, inner chambers. A central fan system operated by a rotating boy with impressive biceps. The goose has its own vestibule. You try not to let it bother you. You focus instead on ambience. You light a small stick of frankincense, tuck it into a carved holder, and let the smoke curl gently into the space. The scent is grounding, earthy, and historically accurate. Ancient Persians used frankincense and myrrh not just in temples, but on the road. Historians suggest it wasn't just spiritual, it masked the more pungent realities of travel. Some even claim it repelled insects. You're not convinced, but it does seem to keep Merzad from hovering too close. Outside, the caravan is coming to a lull. The animals are watered, rubbed down, and gently tethered in a semicircle. A fire pit is dug, not too deep, just enough to hold a small flame. Tonight it's not about cooking, it's about comfort. You bring out the wine, not much, just a clay flask with a wax seal. You open it carefully, sniffing the contents. It's still good, barely. Travel wine is always a gamble. Some of it turns, some of it just gets ideas. This one smells like ripe figs, old wood, and maybe ambition. You pour a small cup, lean back against a cushion, and exhale. The evening air cools your sweat-damp robe, and the fabric clings like a lazy memory. You sip. It's strong, slightly bitter, with a whisper of sweetness at the end, like a well-timed compliment. And then, without warning, Shireen arrives. She doesn't announce herself. She just sweeps in with the breeze, smelling like orange blossom water and judgment. She plops onto your rug without asking, reaches for your wine, and takes a sip without blinking. You're too tired to object. She nods approvingly. "Not bad," she says. "Better than what they served last year at that disaster of a mountain lodge." You nod too. The mountain lodge was a disaster. They forgot the honey cakes and overcooked the lentils. Unforgivable. The two of you sit there for a while, not speaking much, just listening to the crackle of the small fire outside, the shifting of sand under camel feet, and the low hum of one of the musicians tuning something that doesn't sound quite like an instrument yet. It's peaceful. Almost. Then she says, "Your tent's smaller this year." You stare ahead. "It's intentionally minimalist." You both sip. Historians still argue whether noble travelers used these camp setups to one-up each other or simply to survive. The answer is both. The tent was shelter, yes, but also identity. How you camped said as much about you as how you dressed, or how you greeted a host, or how you responded to unsolicited tent critiques from cousins. Eventually, Shireen stands. She adjusts her scarf, drops the cup back into your lap, and says, "The goose is judging your towel. I just thought you should know." She leaves. You lie back on your rug and stare at the darkening roof of your tent. The stars are out there somewhere, so is sleep. You stretch, sigh, and decide you'll deal with goose-related shade tomorrow. Tonight, you've set up your palace, and you are, if not rested, at least properly scented, safely housed, and mildly wine-happy in the middle of the desert. The sky has slipped into its deepest indigo now, dotted with stars sharp enough to cut through the warm haze of the day. Outside, the musicians have struck up a softer tune, something slow, nostalgic, with the kind of rhythm that makes you question every life choice that led you to befriend someone like Shireen and still not pack more fig paste. You are reclining like a noble should, awkwardly, with one elbow digging into the wrong part of a cushion, and your wine cup somehow always just out of reach, but it's fine. It's part of the ambiance. You're surrounded by flickering lamplight, gentle desert wind, and the knowledge that tomorrow is too far away to worry about yet. You glance toward the communal campfire, where a few other travelers have gathered. Someone is attempting to tell a story, but they've forgotten most of it halfway through and are now improvising wildly. It involves a satrap, a lion, and what might be a very aggressive loaf of bread. Everyone pretends it makes sense. Tonight, the main entertainment, aside from the storytelling, is a low-stakes board game called Tax Tack. It's somewhere between dice and strategy and mutual passive aggression. You carry your personal set in a pouch that smells like cedarwood and indecision. The pieces are made of carved bone, each dyed with a different vegetable-based pigment. Your favorites are the deep green ones, dyed with crushed mint leaves and probably cursed, given your win record. You unroll the board on your rug. Shireen appears, of course she does, and sits across from you like she hasn't been silently judging your towel for the past hour. She brings her own pieces, gleaming black stones etched with little crescent moons, custom made. Naturally, Tax-Tack is one of those games historians still argue about. Was it a noble pastime or a sacred ritual disguised as recreation? Did it originate in Elamite courts or the kitchens of bored accountants? What is certain is that it appears in multiple fragments of ancient tablets, often alongside complaints. About lost wages and that one uncle who cheats, you begin play. The rules are vague and mostly made up. There's movement across the board based on dice rolls, but also cards drawn from a fortune pouch that change the direction of play entirely. One card tells you to swap pieces. Another demands a poem recitation. One simply says goose, which no one understands, but always results in someone losing a turn. Your first move is strong. You capture a corner square and advance 2 tokens toward Shireen's center line. She raises an eyebrow. New strategy? Just instinct, you reply, sipping your wine like a general surveying the battlefield. The game continues under the stars. The board glows faintly in the lamplight. Camels snort nearby. One of the musicians begins to hum. Then, disaster. You draw the goose card. There is a beat of silence. Shireen, clearly trying not to smirk, lifts her cup. You know what this means. You sigh. You do. It means that you must, by ancient and unverified tradition, relinquish your next best move and, if the goose is awake, offer it something edible as tribute. You glance toward the crate. The goose is awake. You pull a dried fig from your snack pouch and approach slowly, cautiously, like a priest offering penance. The goose watches you with the calm malevolence of a deity that hasn't yet decided your fate. You bow. Offer the fig. It accepts. You return to the board, dignity intact only by a thread. Shireen wins 2 rounds later. You pretend to care less than you do. She pretends to gloat less than she does. Everyone maintains the illusion of grace. Around the camp, more games are starting. Dice roll in the sand. Someone's brought a deck of oracle cards and is doing very questionable readings. One player is told he'll marry a horse. Another is told to avoid grapes. The cards are vague, the wine is not, and the evening rolls on. This is what noble desert evenings are for. Not politics, not strategy, not the flex of who brought the most musicians or the fanciest bath tent. It's for this, the slow unwind. The candle-lit laughter, the hollow clink of game pieces shuffled by tired hands. It's 1 part performance, 1 part memory-making, and 10 parts desperately trying not to snore first and lose the social game of nighttime alertness. You stretch, yawn, and pack away the board. Your pouch now smells more strongly of mint than it ever has, probably because Shireen snuck in a new token as a joke. It's shaped like a fish. You don't ask. The music winds down. So does the laughter. Even the fire dims. The coals huddled, together like tired dancers after the last song. You return to your tent, slip off your sandals, unravel the outer robe. You lie back on your mat, the towel placed ceremonially over your feet like a protective spell. You close your eyes to the distant sound of flutes, soft footsteps, and the goose muttering what may or may not be curses into the night air. And you think, I may not have won the game, but at least I still smell like sandalwood and mild triumph. You wake early, not because you want to, but because the desert air has turned brisk and your nose, the only part of you not cocooned in fabric, has decided to alert you with a subtle but consistent tingle. It's the kind of cold that doesn't punch you in the face, but rather sneaks up like a mischievous sibling and gently tugs on your toes until you acknowledge its presence. Your breath fogs slightly as you sit up. The tent is quiet, dimly lit by the pre-dawn gray that seeps through the fabric like memory through silk. You reach for your robe, still faintly warm from last night, and wrap it around your shoulders. The towel remains in place because naturally, even your toes deserve luxury. Outside, there's movement. Soft, purposeful, the sound of morning prep, pots clinking, coals being coaxed back to life, camels complaining like hungover theater actors. You push back the tent flap and step into the awakening desert. It's stunning, absolutely, absurdly stunning. The horizon glows with a faint blush. The dunes are brushed with lavender and rose, casting long, sleepy shadows that look like gentle folds in some vast golden blanket. There's dew on the edges of your rugs. Actual dew. In the desert. You feel like the sky itself is trying to apologize for yesterday's heat. But this beauty comes with a price, because in about 2 hours, this place will turn into a convection oven again, and you'll need every trick in your dust-covered scroll of travel knowledge to not melt like a wax seal in the sun. So how do you keep cool? The answer, in ancient Persia, was a mix of ingenuity, ritual, and sheer stubbornness. You begin your own process now, guided by habit and ancestral wisdom, or at least Merzad's morning checklist, barked at you every time the mercury rises. First, layering. It sounds counterintuitive, but it's essential. Your inner robe is made of loosely woven linen, breathable, moisture-wicking, and dyed a pale color to reflect the sun. Over that, you drape a second, slightly heavier layer, made of tightly spun cotton, dyed a deeper tone. This layer acts like armor, deflecting heat, dust, and the occasional over-friendly insect. Second, shade strategy. You assign one of your assistants, or let's be honest, bribe a musician, to carry your portable canopy. It's a square of light cloth stretched between 4 slender rods that can be adjusted depending on sun angle. It makes you look like a slow-moving monarch and also blocks just enough UV to prevent your nose from turning the shade of a pomegranate. Shireen, of course, has 2 canopies, one over her, one over the goose. Third, wet linens. This one's a classic. Take a strip of cloth, soak it in the last of the morning's cool water, and drape it across the back of your neck. The evaporation effect creates a mild cooling sensation. You apply this now, sighing in gratitude, even as your camel eyes you like you've just invented magic. Historians have long documented these techniques, particularly among the traveling classes in Persia's hotter regions. Water management was an art form. Some caravans carried clay jugs lined with straw to keep the contents cool. Others buried water skins during rest stops, letting the earth wick away the heat. One ancient scroll even mentions sun-proof tents woven from moon-bathed wool, which is poetic nonsense, but sounds great on a business card. Breakfast is served shortly after. You sit cross-legged on a rug that is now warm but not hot, and accept a bowl of cooled barley porridge mixed with crushed dates and a dash of goat's milk. It's humble, but the texture is smooth and the flavor, slightly nutty, faintly sweet, lingers just long enough to qualify as comforting. You chase it with mint water, cold, sharp, exactly what your senses need. Shireen joins you, face all ready, powdered, scarf perfectly arranged. "Lovely morning," she says. "You smell faintly of roasted fig and personal growth." You thank her. Sort of. Then comes the inspection. Not of you, of your tent. Every morning it must be aired, dusted, and resecured. Sand creeps in during the night like it owns the place. Your servants lift the rugs, shake out the mat, and sweep the interior with a brush made of bundled palm fronds. You supervise from the comfort of your shady spot, sipping more mint water and pretending not to notice that your sandal strap is fraying again. By the time the sun clears the horizon properly, the caravan is ready, camels loaded, tent collapsed and rolled, water skins filled, canopies folded and tied to poles. It's an efficient little dance, and everyone knows their part. You take one last look around the campsite. The fire pit is smoothed over. No crumbs left, no linens forgotten. Except, of course, the goose's bowl. You don't tell Shireen. You just watch as she notices, and panics, and rushes back to fetch it with the kind of urgency normally reserved for lost heirlooms. You mount your camel, with renewed confidence. Your shade cloth is perfectly angled. Your scarf knotted to allow airflow but blocks sun. Your wet linen drips comfort. You are a traveler of taste, style, and moderate preparation. And as the caravan begins to move, you feel the sun trying to flex. Let it. You have mint water and a towel. The heat arrives slowly, like a guest who doesn't knock, just walks in and starts rearranging your furniture. One moment you're riding in relative comfort beneath your angled canopy, and the next your skin is singing a faint but persistent song of, "Why did you think this was a good idea?" The breeze has grown lazy. Even the sand looks tired, rippling like it's reconsidering its life choices. You reach into your pouch and pull out the desert survival trifecta, a pouch of rosewater dabbed linen squares, a talisman in the shape of a lion's paw, carved from what may be bone or just aggressively aged wood, and a small clay jar of what you proudly call desert balm. You dab the balm along your temples. It smells of cardamom, myrrh, and the subtle hint of a failed date harvest. Refreshing. But even with balm and breeze, there's no getting around it. Your skin is under siege. Your hands feel papery, your lips begin to chap, and your eyelids, yes, even them seem drier than usual. It's time for full skincare mode. The ancient Persian way. You call a quick halt, slide off your camel like a sack of mildly intelligent flour, and retreat under a rock outcrop. Shade, blessed, blessed shade. You rummage in your satchel and pull out your skincare set. Tiny jars, wrapped in cloth, each marked with a symbol. One for cleansing, clay and rose, one for hydration, almond oil and cucumber pulp, and one marked simply nighttime miracles that you know for a fact was blended by a woman in Persepolis who charged you 2 goats and a half-honest compliment. Yes, you moisturize in the desert, and you do it proudly. Ancient Persian skincare was no joke. They used balms, oils, crushed herbs, and yes, even crushed insects for pigmentation. Rosewater was ubiquitous, not only for scent, but for calming sun-drenched skin. Saffron mixed with milk was used to brighten the complexion. And one surprisingly common remedy, aloe pulp mixed with honey and left on the face until the ants become too interested. You skip that one. As you gently cleanse your face with a rose clay square, you glance at your reflection in your polished bronze mirror. You look flushed, sun-touched, but noble. You lean into it, add a touch of sandalwood to your wrists, reknot your scarf for style. Beauty is resistance, especially when you're riding a sun-blasted mammal with a bad attitude and sand in its ears. You rejoin the caravan, now lounging in a mid-morning rest circle. Everyone looks droopy. Shireen is fanning herself with a palm leaf, glaring at the goose, which seems to have commandeered a water dish for foot bathing. One of her musicians has wrapped himself entirely in a travel rug and is humming what might be a lullaby or might be heat stroke. You sit beside Merzad, who is chewing something green and bitter. You ask what it is. He mutters, "Desert chew." You ask again. He grunts, "Mint, vinegar, and whatever I found this morning." You decline politely. Instead, you produce your own stash of dried apple slices soaked in rose water. He takes one, doesn't complain, which is his version of a 5-star review. You lean back and let the moment stretch. Historians still debate whether ancient Persians in the field really embraced this kind of self-care. Some argue that grooming and skincare were strictly ceremonial. Others say daily routines, including oiling the skin, scenting the hair, and applying clay masks, were as common as eating dates or complaining about taxes. There's even mention in one scroll of a satrap who traveled with a face servant, Someone whose only job was to reapply his eyebrow dye every 2 hours. You feel you are, spiritually, that satrap. Now it's time for charms. You reach for your talisman pouch. Inside, a tiny bronze scarab. Wrong culture, right vibe. A sun-shaped bead made of lapis lazuli, and a strip of parchment with a Zoroastrian verse you only half understand but read anyway. You tie them to your scarf, near your shoulder, where the sun can see them. Not for protection exactly, more like a polite nudge to the universe. Hey, still here, still flammable, please be gentle. Merzad watches, says nothing, but after a moment he tightens the leather cord around his own wrist. A charm from his sister, he once told you, made from the hair of a horse that saved her life. Or maybe a horse that simply sneezed on her at a formative age. He wasn't clear. Charms, talismans, rituals, they're part of the journey. Part of keeping the desert from feeling like a monster and more like a misunderstood pen pal. They ground you. Remind you that even if your skin is burning, your sweat has purpose. You sip your water, still cool, miraculously. The clay jug it came from is wrapped in damp linen, which acts like a portable air conditioner. You make a mental note to kiss the potter's feet if you survive this trip. Then the wind shifts. Just a little. A soft breeze. It's enough. You gather your things, re-oil your wrists, and remount. Soft thunder groans as always, but allows you aboard without too much drama. The caravan continues. And you? You glide forward, fragrant, hydrated, and blessed with the quiet confidence of someone whose pores are doing just fine, thank you. You're halfway into the day's journey now, and it's time for one of the most delicate, high-pressure operations of the entire trip. Bringing the right gift. Not just any gift, mind you. Not a casual token or some leftover pouch of dried berries. No. This is the tribute you've brought for your host, the satrap overseeing this weekend gathering, a man whose power is matched only by his taste in lapis-inlaid tea kettles and cryptic one-liners about wind direction. You've been thinking about this gift for weeks. It had to be subtle, but impressive. Personal, yet universal. Last year, someone brought him a hand-carved chessboard made from mountain ash and got promoted to estate manager within the month. Another brought a poor-quality wine flask and was promptly assigned to camel dung census duty. The stakes are real. You sit down during a rest stop and unpack the parcel from its padded pouch. Inside, a pair of ivory chopsticks from India, finely etched with phoenixes and fish, symbols of renewal and abundance. You're not sure which direction the symbolism leans more toward, but you figure both are useful when trying to impress. A man who once rejected a tapestry because it felt too thirsty. Historians confirm that ancient Persian nobles took gift-giving very seriously. It was part diplomacy, part theater, and part cosmic insurance policy. You were judged on the quality of your tribute, yes, but also on how well it matched the host's known preferences, mood, or recent dreams. One ancient letter from a noble to his steward includes the line, "Ensure the melons are arranged according to last month's vision, lest we offend the stars." Ambiguous, but it worked. The melons were accepted. Your cousin Shireen, naturally, has outdone herself again. She's brought a sculpted incense burner shaped like a lion holding a flute. It's theatrical, possibly cursed. The lion's expression suggests he's mid-sonata or mid-exorcism. It's a choice. She eyes your parcel and raises a single eyebrow. "Chopsticks," she says. "They're symbolic," you reply. "They're sticks. They're rare, imported, sticks." She sips her date syrup like she's just won the conversation. Merzad, for his part, has brought nothing. "I bring my presence," he says, which might be noble stoicism or the world's laziest excuse. Then again, he's not a guest in the traditional sense. He's your protector, your advisor, and occasionally your impromptu footstool when your, legs fall asleep. Still, you can't help but feel the weight of the gift on your lap like it contains more than just ivory. It's your handshake, your hello. Your polite declaration that you are not, in fact, a barbarian who hands over goat cheese and calls it a day. You remember last year's mistake. You brought a selection of preserved plums, delicate, fragrant, and carefully packed. But someone in the supply train mixed them up with Shireen's spa pebbles, and the satrap's expression when he tried to eat one still haunts your dreams. This year, you triple-checked. You re-wrapped the chopsticks with care. Layers of dyed linen tied with a silver thread. You even tucked a dried sprig of mint between the folds. Not for the satrap, really, but for the scent. Soothing, centering. Then comes the moment of mild panic. What if he doesn't use chopsticks? What if he thinks they're weapons? What if he's allergic to ivory? You start composing backup explanations in your head. They're ceremonial. They represent balance. They double as hair ornaments. All technically true. All deeply desperate. Historians still argue whether Persian nobles had such obsessive concerns about these interactions, but the surviving etiquette tablets suggest yes. They even included instructions like, do not hand the gift directly, allow it to be discovered, and if your gift is mocked, laugh first. You note both. You pack the tribute carefully back into your saddlebag, nestled between your extra towel and the now slightly crunchier honeyed almonds. Then you glance over and notice one of the musicians carving something into a piece of driftwood. It's simple, elegant, and infuriatingly kind of beautiful. You ask what he's making. A flute, he says. To sell? No, he shrugs. I like to give one wherever I go. For memory. You blink. That's it. That's the energy you want. Not desperation, not strategy, gesture. You decide that if the chopsticks don't land, you'll give the satrap a song on your reed flute. You'll say it came to you while watching a goose contemplate the meaning of heat. You'll call it Ode to a Disappointed Bird. At least it'll be memorable. The caravan begins to move again. The heat is still rising, but the worst of it has passed. The shadows are shifting westward now, and the promise of your destination, the oasis camp, is just over the next few ridges. You pat your saddlebag once, gently. The gift is secure. Your backup plan is musical, and your towel is still the cleanest in the group. Whatever happens, at least you didn't bring spa pebbles. The wind shifts again, but this time it's not gentle. It's abrupt, like someone turned on an invisible oven and tossed in a handful of loose sand for seasoning. Your scarf lifts from your shoulders. Your camel makes a low, grumbling complaint. Ahead, Merzad stops riding. You don't hear him say anything, but you feel the energy change. That tense ripple that passes through a group when nature decides to remind everyone who's in charge. A sandstorm is coming. You've heard stories. You've even witnessed one once, from the safety of a stone outpost, sipping sour milk and feeling very superior about not being outside. But now, you're in it. Well, almost in it. The horizon to the southeast has shifted into a blur. A low brown smudge moving unnaturally fast. You have minutes. Maybe. Shireen has noticed too. Her eyebrows furrow just slightly. The goose stares at the sky with the blank intensity of a creature that already knows the universe is trying to ruin its day. You leap. No. Okay. Descend with purpose from your camel and start prepping like your dignity depends on it. Which, frankly, it does. Step 1. Face wrap. You pull your scarf up and over, tucking it across your nose and mouth, then looping it over your head like a desert-born mystery icon. You reach for your secondary scarf, the thin one, soaked in. Diluted vinegar water. It's not stylish, but it filters the air. Sort of. Merzad once claimed it also keeps evil spirits out of your lungs. You're not willing to test that theory. Step 2. Quick shelter. Now you're grateful for packing the emergency lean-to. A foldable frame with 2 heavy linen flaps, dyed dark red and stitched with little protective phrases. You snap it open. With practiced efficiency, using short iron stakes to pin it into the sand. It won't withstand the worst, but it'll buy time. Shireen is halfway into her own process, shouting orders at her assistants. One of her musicians is tangled in a canopy rope. Another is holding the goose like an offering. You toss her a spare scarf. She catches it mid-command. Borrowing this, she says, as if the sandstorm isn't about to redecorate the entire desert. Step 3. Emergency fashion. Yes, really. Because if you're going to be swallowed by a wall of sand and mild panic, you're doing it while looking like a dignified scroll illustration. You adjust your outer robe to seal at the neck, tighten the belt, and tug your sleeves down. You do not want to be exfoliated that thoroughly. You secure your satchel with an extra loop of twine. Last time you didn't, a breeze stole your incense tin and scattered it across a donkey's backside. Historians describe sandstorms in ancient Persia with a mix of awe and literary embellishment. Some scrolls refer to them as the breath of Ahura Mazda in displeasure, others as an angry soup of knives. Practically, they were known hazards. Travelers carried protective layers, emergency kits, and always watched for the warning. Signs, sudden silence, pressure drops, and camels acting more sarcastic than usual. You duck into your makeshift shelter just as the wind hits. It's not a roar, it's a howl. A banshee of dust and heat and flying particles that hit your canopy, with sharp little thwop sounds, like someone is trying to make popcorn out of pebbles. Your camel lies down beside your shelter, pressing itself close to the earth in ancient instinct. You do the same. The scarf across your face is instantly coated. You blink into the darkness, trying not to think about how much sand has already migrated into your eyebrows. Outside, someone shouts. Possibly in triumph, possibly in horror. You can't tell. You breathe slowly, carefully. Sandstorms are not a test of strength. They're a test of patience. You think of all the other nobles who have survived this before you. Probably while cradling a very expensive urn and whispering apologies to their ancestors. You grip your staff. Inside your shelter, the world shrinks to sound and dust. You focus on breathing through the scarf, feeling the fabric move slightly with each inhale. You hum, quietly. Just a scale. The same scale you learned from your music tutor who claimed humming during stressful situations would align your internal organs. He also once fell asleep standing, so maybe not an authority. After an indeterminate amount of time, 5 minutes, 20, the storm begins to fade. The howl becomes a whistle. The sand falls less like knives, more like lazy confetti. You peek out. The light is shifting again, softening. Your shelter held. You brush the top layer of grit from your robe. Sand pours from your hood like ancient secrets. You cough once, taste vinegar and mild regret. Then you emerge fully. The camp is still standing. Mostly. Shireen's tent is down. The goose is free. One of the musicians has tied a scarf around its neck like a cape. You're too tired to ask. You regroup, repack, help one of the assistants locate his lost sandal, which somehow ended up in a food jar. Merzad emerges, his head scarf perfectly in place, looking annoyingly unbothered. You glare. He smirks. The caravan takes stock. Nothing major lost. A few scattered bundles, some shaken nerves, and a tent pole that now has philosophical views. You remount your camel. The sky has cleared. The air is crisp again, renewed. The sandstorm has swept the land like a great, terrible broom, and left, behind silence. You ride forward, grateful for your scarf, your canopy, and the fact that your gift for the satrap is still wrapped and sand-free. Barely. You've survived the sandstorm. That should feel victorious. Instead, you feel dusty in places you didn't know could feel dusty. Your ears, gritty, your teeth, lightly textured, and your pride, well, it's intact, just wearing a slightly singed robe and blinking at the sun like a hungover owl, but it's not over. Not entirely, because as the caravan regroups and the camels grumble back into formation, someone realizes something's missing. Not something material. No, no. Something far more crucial to noble desert operations. The priest. Yes, the Zoroastrian priest. Gone. Technically, he's not missing, just elsewhere. Apparently, when the sandstorm hit, he took refuge inside a nearby crevice, muttering prayers and tucking himself into a creased scroll like a very anxious burrito. He's safe. Physically, spiritually, that's another matter. You find him sitting on a flat rock now, brushing sand off his ceremonial stole and whispering about omens in the wind patterns. His eyes are wide, his hair is full of sand, and he is not happy. This presents a problem. You were supposed to arrive at the oasis camp with the priest. That was part of the plan. A proper entrance, a blessing upon arrival, a few chanted verses, maybe a fire lit with oil that smells faintly of oregano and warning. Now, your priest looks like he needs a blessing just to stand up. You sit beside him. Offer water. Offer your spare vinegar scarf. Offer a dried fig with quiet reverence. He accepts all three, muttering about the sands of consequence and the time I accidentally blessed a horse. Merzad crouches nearby, arms crossed. Should we wait? You think for a moment. The sun is shifting. The oasis isn't far. But this is delicate, because in ancient Persia, traveling without a priest wasn't just inconvenient. It was potentially offensive. Spiritual protection, blessings for the land you pass through, and, most critically, the ability to perform last-minute rituals to avert disasters involving spoiled food, bad dreams, or a goose that keeps staring into the fire and blinking in rhythm. These were the responsibilities of your holy companion. Historians still debate how many nobles traveled with official religious support. Some claim it was standard protocol for larger expeditions. Others argue it was more about appearances. If the host expected a priest, then you expected a priest. Either way, you brought one. And right now, he's hugging his knees and whispering something about fire temples and misplaced stars. You give him a moment. Then gently, very gently, you remind him of the itinerary. You use the tone one might use with a startled donkey. Soft, reassuring, mildly pleading. He straightens, slowly, breathes deep, then says, "Fine, but I need to sprinkle ash on my feet before walking." You blink. "Why?" "Balance." You don't argue. You fetch ash from the cooking fire. He sprinkles, he stands, he adjusts his sash, and then, with the dignity of someone who has just personally forgiven the wind, he walks back to the caravan. Crisis averted. You remount. The journey resumes. The rhythm returns. But now everything feels just slightly off. Perhaps because you can't stop wondering, what happens without the priest? You remember the tales, small ones told at night, over weak wine and overcooked lentils, about travelers who skipped blessings and lost their shadows, about nobles who ignored the fire rituals and developed inexplicable ankle pain, about satraps who mocked a priest's hair and later were found inexplicably cursed with a singing voice that only summoned bees. You don't believe them, not really, but you still touch the tiny scroll tied around your wrist, your own blessing, written weeks ago by a temple scribe who smelled like apricots and spoke only in metaphors. The rest of the journey to the oasis is quieter. People are tired, reflective. Even the goose has tucked its beak beneath one wing, presumably dreaming of vengeance and grapeskins. When the oasis finally comes into view, it's like seeing a mirage, but one that keeps refusing to fade. Palm. Trees. A splash of green against the tan, the glint of water, and faintly the sound of bells. Yes, bells. Not wind chimes, not camel bells. These are delicate, metallic, arranged in a gentle melody that dances on the breeze. The satrap has arrived, and he's brought ambiance. You feel the caravan subtly shift in posture, robes adjusted, sand brushed off, tired expressions replaced with practiced serenity. Even Merzad wipes the dust from his sword hilt, just in case this turns into a very formal meet and greet with light refreshments and political undertones. The priest walks beside you now, composed again, dignified, only a little ashy. You're relieved, not just because his presence completes your party, but because you're not spiritually responsible for forgetting him anymore. You glance at the oasis, then back at your priest and think, next time, he's riding inside the goose crate, just in case. The oasis greets you like a dream that overslept. Palm trees sway gently, their fronds rustling with that smug, well-watered sort of confidence only plants living near freshwater can muster. The air changes too, less harsh, more humid, carrying the scent of damp soil, ripening fruit, and people who haven't been sweating through 4 layers of linen for the last 2 days. It's beautiful, it's peaceful, and it's filled with leftovers. Not the people, no, the food. Because by the time you're shown to your designated camp spot, 3rd row, partial shade, excellent visibility for subtle one-upmanship, you're met by a small team of servants who've been prepping your evening meal for hours. And among the many platters, bowls, and baskets now being offloaded and arranged around your freshly erected casual dining canopy are the oddments, the bits and pieces that didn't quite make it into the formal menu but refused to die. Quietly, leftover dates, everywhere, in a bowl, on a platter, stuffed into pastry, smeared onto a cheese wedge that looks like it's been having an identity crisis since noon. Now to the untrained traveler, dates are simply a tasty, sticky fruit that occasionally glues your molars together. But to you, a seasoned noble of at least moderate competency, dates are currency. A survival tool, a meal enhancer, a potential bribe, a glue substitute, and in desperate moments, a form of entertainment. Merzad, standing nearby, bites into one and raises an eyebrow. Fresh. You nod solemnly. They came from the better side of the tree. He doesn't laugh, but he does take a second one. That's basically a standing ovation. You start to inventory your personal leftover stash, because naturally, you've also brought your own. A cloth pouch of sun-dried dates packed by your aunt, whose love is expressed through overfeeding and passive-aggressive recipe scrolls. A sealed jar of date paste mixed with walnuts and saffron, and your personal favorite, a rolled sweet made from mashed dates and ground sesame, shaped into tiny cubes and wrapped in fig leaves. You have precisely 5 left. You guard them like gold. The question now becomes, what do you do with all of this? Well, historically, leftover dates weren't just snacked on, they were repurposed. Ancient Persians were nothing if not resourceful. Dates were pressed into cakes for travel, fermented into wine, with mixed results, mashed into sweeteners, or used in medicines. One curious tablet even describes a date poultice for camel bites, which raises both questions and eyebrows. You. Consider your options. First, you set aside a handful for dessert. You're hosting Shireen tonight under your canopy, an attempt to reassert that your towel isn't the only thing you have going for you. Presentation matters. You arrange the dates on a small plate, sprinkle them with crushed pistachios, and drizzle them with the last of your spiced honey. Then you prep your incense warmer. You place 2 dates inside to caramelize slightly and scent the tent. This is mostly for flair, but it works. The air smells sweet and warm. Even the goose seems temporarily soothed. Next, the bribe pouch. Yes, you have one. Every noble does. A little satchel of sweet things reserved for small negotiations. Entry into a crowded bathhouse. Silence from a too-curious poet. Or in your case, persuading Shireen's most dramatic musician to stop playing the desert longing ballad. Every time someone sighs, you stuff 3 date cubes into the pouch and nod to yourself. He'll crack by sunset. You're about to sit back and enjoy the fruits of your strategizing when a soft voice calls from the neighboring tent. It's the priest. I lost my sandals again. Of course he did. You bring him a handful of mashed date balls instead, hoping the sugar will rewire his brain enough to retrace his steps. He eats 2, squints thoughtfully at the sand, and then wanders off muttering about spiritual geometry. You count that as a win. As the sun begins to dip below the horizon, painting the oasis in peach and lavender, your canopy glows with lantern light. Your date platter sits center stage, and Shireen arrives in full regalia, silk robe, kohl-lined eyes, an expression that says, "Impress me," without bothering to move her mouth. She picks up a date cube, sniffs it, bites, then, reluctantly, imperceptibly, nods. "You remembered the pistachios this time," she says. You smile like that wasn't the entire point. The 2 of you recline under the canopy, sipping date syrup diluted with mint water, listening to the lazy chirping of insects and the occasional splash from the oasis pool where someone is trying and failing to bathe discreetly. Even the priest has returned, barefoot, victorious, holding what may or may not be his original sandals. You lean back, content. The leftover dates are dwindling, but they've served their purpose. Sweetened the evening, soothed a priest, bribed a bard, silenced a cousin, and you've still got 1 fig-wrapped cube left in your robe pocket. Dessert, for you alone. If you thought the caravan itself was a dance of organized chaos, wait until you try managing the return logistics of camels, donkeys, crates, blankets, and 1 still emotionally complex goose. Because now, at this exact golden hour moment, when the oasis feels like the beating heart of comfort, the real challenge begins. Animal coordination. You've barely finished the last of your date syrup when a servant approaches with the softest of throat clears, a signal that it's time to start considering departure arrangements, which is noble speak for start panicking gently about how we're getting home. Let's begin with the camels. Your personal mount, Soft Thunder, is currently lying in the sand, chewing slowly and pointedly, ignoring you. He does this when he's mad. About what? Could be anything. Your tone. The lack of citrus in today's feed. That one time you told him he had expressive eyes. Who knows? Merzad squats nearby, adjusting the harness straps on the lead camel. They remember, he mutters, every bump, every slip, every time someone made them walk too close to the goose. He glares meaningfully at you. You glare back. In ancient Persia, camels were the elite transport option for desert travel, but they were also divas. Noble families often had one handler whose sole job was to memorize camel preferences. Some preferred soft grass mats at Eid night. Others wanted their water jugs cooled. One particularly infamous camel in royal records refused to walk unless led by a woman singing lullabies. You assume that one got a statue. Soft Thunder is not that dramatic, but he is particular. You approach with caution, bearing a bribe. A fig rolled in crushed barley. He sniffs it, huffs, then eats it slowly, as if weighing your future together. You take that as a yes. Meanwhile, the donkeys are having their own union meeting. Yours, Daria, is standing in the shade, completely still, eyes half-lidded in what can only be described as active ignoring. She knows it's time to go. She also knows that if she doesn't move, someone will eventually repack her just to get things going. This is her move. Every time, you crouch beside her. Whisper sweet nothings. Mention that you've got leftover lentil cakes. She twitches an ear. You elaborate. Sesame topping. She blinks. Then, with the sigh of someone making a morally gray decision, she takes one slow step forward. Progress. Now, onto the wagons. Shireen's bath tent disassembly team has arrived late and confused. They're arguing over pole length, fabric folding order, and whether the goose should be moved before or after the incense chest. You watch from a distance, sipping your third cup of mint water and trying not to look smug. She catches your gaze. Your tent folds because it's small, she says. You smile. Yes, like a clever idea. She pretends not to hear you. Ancient wagons weren't just wooden boxes with wheels. They were mobile treasure troves. Some were padded with felt to cushion delicate items. Others had built-in compartments for scrolls. Oil vials, even tiny bird cages, don't ask. You inspect your own travel cart now, a squat little number covered in blue-dyed linen and reinforced with bronze nails. It has squeaked precisely once per mile on this journey. And no one, not even Merzad, can find the source of the squeak. You accept it as part of its personality. Your packing process begins. Scrolls into the scroll pouch, food into the clay cooler, carefully nested with wet cloth. Towel. Yes, still, sand-free, folded and wrapped around your reed flute like a royal baby. Everything must go back in its place, not just for efficiency, but because you know you'll forget something if you don't follow ritual. Last time you left a sandal. The time before, a servant. He caught up. Eventually. Shireen's process, in contrast, involves a lot of shouting. Not that jar, she calls. That's the face balm. The other one is for ankles. You try not to judge. You fail. Merzad, as always, is packed in 20 minutes. His entire kit fits into 2 leather rolls and a shoulder bag that probably doubles as a weapon. He checks his blade edge while you're still wondering if your third robe should be folded or rolled. It's unsettling. You suspect he gets up before dawn just to be done first. Then comes the final inspection. Animals packed. Bags loaded. Water skins filled. Towel absolutely accounted for. You glance at the priest who is currently holding the goose and whispering to it. You choose to ignore this moment entirely. Historians often gloss over the return logistics of noble expeditions, focusing more on the glamour of arrival or the poetic misery of the road. But truthfully, leaving was its own ordeal. The repacking, the balancing, the distribution of remaining supplies. The small, whispered arguments over who gets the last cool melon slice. You've handled it well. Nothing broken, no one misplaced, only one minor sandal crisis. You mount Soft Thunder, who groans less than usual. You take that as progress. Behind you, the oasis begins to fade. The satrap's tent glows faintly in the early evening. The music has quieted. The palm trees sway like they're waving goodbye. You exhale, ready, packed. Not necessarily willing, but definitely prepared. And as the caravan turns back toward the open sand, you glance one last time at the oasis. Just in time to see the priest drop his sandals. Again. The first hour of the return journey is deceptively calm. The sun has mellowed into a polite bronze, and the wind, perhaps sensing it overdid things earlier with the sandstorm, now hums quietly like a bard who knows when to let the lute rest. You're back in your saddle, scarf angled just right, robe adjusted for airflow, and towel securely packed, still looking like the emotional center of your packing system. But you know, no. This is the calm before the proverbial desert. Storm. Because now comes the part of travel no noble training, no meticulously folded linens, no prayer scrolls nor fig cubes can fully prepare you for. Bandits. Not the dramatic kind with shouting and sword flourishes, though those exist. No, you're more concerned about the subtler threats. Thieves, charmers, tricksters, and opportunists who have made a career out of politely relieving nobles of their luggage without technically attacking anyone. They're clever. They're discreet. And they especially love small caravans, returning from extravagant weekends with too many bath tents and too few guards. Merzad rides beside you, visibly more alert now. His hand hovers near his belt, where a small bronze blade rests in a sheath shaped like a lion's jaw. He doesn't speak, but the angle of his posture tells you everything. Expect someone to try something? You ask, voice light. Always, he mutters, scanning the horizon like it just insulted his mother. You nod. You've prepared for this. First, your pouches. You wear 3 visible ones. They're modest, functional. One holds dried fruit. Another contains a tiny scroll of inspirational quotes. Even camels kneel sometimes, etc. The third is empty, bait. Flashy, decorated, loose-lidded, practically begging to be picked. Then there's the real pouch, hidden beneath your outer robe, tied with a loop that requires 3 fingers and 1 good curse to undo. Inside, your tribute gift, still safe, your emergency money, not much but enough to bribe your way out of a boring hostage situation, and your precious reed flute, wrapped tightly in your spare scarf. You also wear a charm bracelet, not the pretty kind. These charms are for security. A tiny bell that alerts you when someone fiddles with your camel's harness. A button-sized mirror shard for checking behind you without turning your head. And perhaps most importantly, a tiny stitched pouch of garlic and rue, which smells awful but apparently keeps away both bad luck and nosy strangers. Shireen, for her part, has adopted her "don't even try me" riding posture. Back straight, chin tilted. One hand loosely holding the reins, the other adjusting her hair like it's a blade. Her bath tent is packed down tight, and the goose is securely crated, with extra knots. You suspect the knots are to keep the goose in, not anyone out. Historians suggest that travelers of status often relied more on aura than armament. Looking too armed was considered tacky. Looking helpless, however, was a different kind of bait. The ideal noble traveler appeared serene, unbothered, and just slightly haunted, confidently inconvenienced, as one scholar put it. You try to embody that now, as the caravan snakes across the sun-striped plain. A figure appears in the distance, walking alone. That's never a good sign. Merzad sees him too. He signals subtly, a single raised eyebrow, a shift of the reins. The figure waves. He's holding a staff, dressed plainly, face half covered. Could be a traitor, could be a traveler in need, could be a distraction. You nudge your camel to the side slightly. Keep distance. Shireen does the same. The rest of the group mirrors you. The priest mutters something about unexpected guests bearing dusty riddles. You pretend not to hear. The figure passes, nods politely, and keeps walking. You exhale, then notice something's off. The rear cart, the one carrying your food crate and the spare water jugs, wobbled. You twist around. One of the crates is open, slightly ajar. The cloth covering it, missing. You signal to Merzad. He's already moving. He loops around the back of the caravan, inspects the cart, finds a loose string, a half-tied knot, and, most telling of all, a single fig cube lying in the sand. Bait. Your bait. The decorative pouch was lifted. Cleanly. You check. Gone. They didn't take anything real. But still. The message is clear. You've been marked. From here on out, it's security mode. Merzad doubles the rear guard. You switch your robe to the longer version that hides your gait. Shireen pulls out a shawl that turns her into a mobile pile of expensive fabric. Even the goose looks more alert. You reach into your charm pouch and touch the garlic bundle. It smells terrible. You feel better. As night falls, the caravan finds a sheltered rise to camp on. Easy to guard, hard to sneak up on. Fires are small. Conversation minimal. Your flute stays in its scarf. Your towel, still present, still pristine. Somehow that brings you peace. Historians rarely detail these moments. The near misses, the subtle thefts, the emotional weariness of always watching shadows. But they mattered, because ancient travel wasn't just about roads and rest stops. It was about trust and learning, slowly, who had your back, who had your pouch, and who knew how to make garlic smell like reassurance. You roll out your mat, Wrap yourself tight. Sleep comes slower tonight, but you feel ready. Because next time someone tries to lift your bait pouch, you'll be the one watching them. Morning arrives with a kind of sleepy dignity. The desert is quiet, suspended in that silvery pink light that makes every rock look like it's just been oiled, and every shadow seem vaguely poetic. You wake slowly. First, your ears register the distant rustling of palm fronds, then your nose catches the scent of warm dust and someone's leftover lentil cakes being reheated over coals. Finally, your brain stirs just enough to send a message to your spine. We regret to inform you, this body is currently under reconstruction. Yes, the stiffness has arrived. Classic post-camping creakiness. You shift on your mat, stretch gently, and immediately cramp your left foot. Spectacular. You wince, breathe, and try again. The morning breeze is soft, cool, and filled with that lovely illusion that the heat of the day might not come. You know better. It's coming. It always does. But for now, you have a precious window of comfort, and you intend to use it for the most noble and strategic of purposes, a nap. Not right now, of course. Not while things are being packed up and camels are groaning into the void, but you're planning ahead. Because sometime between the post-breakfast repacking and the third ceremonial water stop, there will be a midday rest break. And during that break, you will claim and defend the perfect nap spot. This is not indulgence. This is survival. In ancient Persia, midday naps were serious business. The hot hour, as it was sometimes known, was not just a moment for rest, but a vital pause in the rhythm of the day. Poets wrote about it. Physicians prescribed it. Nobles competed for shade like gladiators with silk fans. And if you were clever, you scouted early. You eat a quick breakfast. Dried figs, a heel of date-sweetened bread, and a small cup of goat milk stirred with mint and honey. It's simple, energizing, and just bland enough to make you grateful. You remembered to bring your clove toothpick. You sip, munch, and start looking around. Step 1. Location. You ride ahead of the caravan for a bit and spot a low hill to the east. It's gentle, wide, and, more importantly, partially shaded by a tall clump of tamarisk bushes. That's rare out here, and valuable. You circle it once, make a mental note of the wind direction, and casually toss one of your pebbles onto the spot. It's a claiming ritual. Not official, but respected. If someone moves your pebble later, you have permission to dramatically raise an eyebrow at them for 3 days. Step 2. Equipment. You instruct one of your attendants to ride ahead and begin prepping. Out comes your beloved nap kit, a tightly rolled mat stuffed with lamb's wool, a light quilt dyed with indigo swirls, and a small padded headrest designed to cradle your ears just enough to block camel sounds, but still hear if someone's trying to flirt nearby. You also have a shade structure, portable, collapsible, and styled to look like you've borrowed it from a retired priest who really knew how to lounge. It sets up quickly, holds just enough tension to flap gently in the breeze, and is lined with strips of linen dipped in rose water for scent and status. Step 3. Environmental harmonization. This is where things get personal. You set a small incense cone, fig resin, and clove on a dish and light it carefully. The smoke is lazy, curling upward in slow spirals. It smells like bedtime at home, like books, like your grandmother's courtyard naps where no one spoke louder than a whisper. And even the birds were too polite to caw. You also bring your flute, not to play necessarily, just to keep close, in case you need to hum a few notes or ward off a chatty neighbor. Nothing signals "not now" like a noble reclining beneath gauzy shade, clutching a reed instrument and sighing meaningfully into the distance. Step 4. Defense perimeter. You angle your saddle packs to create a soft boundary. Not aggressive, just suggestive. You drape your robe just so, place your sandals neatly beside the mat, and set a small bowl of soaked almonds nearby. To the untrained eye, it says hospitality. But to anyone with sense, it says, this nap is curated. Do not disturb. Satisfied, you return to the caravan and ride with the group until midday, and then, as predicted, the halt is called. You break away, return to your claimed dune, and find, miraculously, your pebble untouched. You settle in. The mat is just warm enough. The pillow soft but firm. The breeze dances through the linen strips and brings with it the distant scent of roasted cumin from someone else's lunch. You lie back. And then, a sound. Not loud. Just familiar. You open one eye. It's Merzad. He's curled up about 5 paces away, under a smaller patch of shade, using his saddle as a pillow and his traveling cloak as a blanket. He's already snoring, a low, rhythmic hum that vibrates through the sand like a warning. He looks peaceful. So peaceful. You consider throwing a fig at him, but figs are expensive, and he's earned this. Probably. You close your eyes again, and then a second sound, like a faint, defiant flap. You open the other eye. The goose. It's standing about 6 paces away, staring directly at you. Not at your nap, not at your mat. At you. It blinks slowly, steps forward once, then stops. Its expression? Hard to say. Somewhere between impressed and planning something. You refuse to be intimidated. You roll over onto your side, rearrange your towel into a little foot blanket, and breathe in the smell of clove, mint, and defiance. Let them come. You've built a nap spot worthy of poetry, worthy of scrolls, worthy of the gods. And if that goose takes one more step closer, you'll consider writing a new chapter of epic desert feuds. For now, though, you drift. You wake from your nap with the heavy-lidded contentment of a sultan who's just dreamed of taxes collecting themselves. For a long, delicious moment, you don't move. You just lie there, cocooned in your towel-lined mat, the shade of your travel canopy swaying gently above you, casting dappled shadows that dance like lazy poetry across your face. Your limbs feel warm and heavy, like they've been marinated in comfort. You smell faintly of clove, rosewater, and sleep itself. This was, by all measures, a good nap. You slowly sit up, pushing away the edge of the quilt that you forgot you draped over your knees. Around you, the desert is easing into its golden hour, low sun, long shadows, and that deep amber glow that makes every rock, camel, and unwashed musician look heroic. You take a deep breath, stretch with theatrical flair, and then, because you are a creature of routine, immediately check your belongings. First, the towel still here, folded precisely, crisp at the corners. It survived sandstorms, snacking geese, and nap-related leg tangles. It will outlive us all. Second, the mint almond snack bowl, empty. Suspiciously so. You eye the nearby sand for tracks. A small indent near the edge of your mat suggests that someone, or something, helped themselves. You glance at the goose. It is also asleep. Beak tucked under wing, its round belly gently rising and falling like a feathered water skin. Perhaps innocent. Perhaps dreaming of almond crimes. You sigh and begin gathering your things. The mat is shaken, the canopy unhooked. The incense cone burned itself out halfway through your nap, leaving behind a trail of ash that looks vaguely like your great-aunt's profile. You consider it a blessing. And then, of course, the unraveling begins. Packing, as we've discussed, is an art. Repacking, that's the art after it's been stepped on, dunked in date syrup, and left under a camel. Nothing fits the same way it did when you first departed. Robes that once folded neatly now puff like angry bread. Blankets resist the roll. Pouches expand. And you, despite being one person, somehow now own more things than when you arrived. You begin the ritual. Mat rolled. Tied with linen. canopy folded like an offended fan. Sand shaken from your headscarf, you'll find more in your ears tomorrow. And then you reach for your reed flute, except it's not there. You pause, freeze really, then pat down your towel, your rolled mat, your bedding. You check your robe folds, your pouch, nothing. You frown, search again, this time methodically. You check under the mat, inside the almond bowl, just in case, and even under the goose, a mistake. Still nothing. Then you notice the folded parchment, tucked gently between your travel pillow and your half-folded outer robe. It's a thin, pale square of bark paper, inscribed with a single line of calligraphy in dark brown ink. Ode to the Sleeping Lion. Thank you. You blink. Read it again. A gift, a message, a poetic theft. You exhale. Smile. Then nod. Someone took your flute. Not to steal it, but to honor it. Perhaps one of Shireen's musicians. Perhaps one of your own attendants. Or perhaps the desert. Itself decided it was time to reassign your reed companion. Either way, it feels right. Like your nap had an audience. And someone, somewhere, heard your breath and thought, that rhythm belongs to the wind now. Ancient Persian travel culture was full of tiny exchanges like this, items left behind, tokens gifted silently, rituals made not for transaction, but for memory. A comb laid at a spring, a slipper left at the edge of a sacred hill. Even bits of song, hummed once and never again, were believed to linger in the stones. Some nobles carried an extra scarf just for gifting. Others carried two, one to keep, one to forget. You rise to your feet, slightly off balance from the nap fog. Your muscles feel rested, your skin slightly sticky, your brain still unspooling dream thread. But you feel calm, settled, lighter, until, of course, you realize your sandals are missing. Again, you groan softly, begin the search. Under the mat? No. Behind the folded canopy? No. Near the priest's pack? Somehow, yes. Your sandals are neatly stacked beside a jug of barley water. How they got there, who carried them, and why they were placed with such precision is a mystery you choose not to solve. You simply nod to the jug. Thanks, you mutter. Then you return to your packing. Your satchel, now slightly more full than before, contains the usual: towel, fig candies, prayer scroll, extra sash. You add the parchment note, fold it into your book of travel writings, not for evidence, but for story. As you finish packing, Shireen approaches. Her robe is immaculate, her eyes bright, her lips pursed with the delicate tension of someone who has definitely just had an argument with a camel. You lost your flute, she says, smug. You shake your head. I gifted it, accidentally. She looks down at your now fully packed roll, then over at the sunset. You're ready early. I'm aging. She laughs, a small one, then tosses you a date cake wrapped in leaf. For the road, she says. Or to trade with the goose if it gets grumpy again. You bow, take it, and slip it into your pouch. The camp begins to stir now. Camels are being reloaded. Rugs rolled, shadows lengthen. The sky deepens to that rare desert lavender. You mount Soft Thunder, who makes a noise that sounds almost approving. The caravan turns west, and you, robe slightly crooked, pouch slightly heavier, flute slightly mourned, ride into the cooling dusk with almond crumbs in your pocket and sand in your hair. But your towel, perfectly packed. The desert is quieter now. Not silent, never silent, but slower, more thoughtful. As if even the sand has decided to whisper. You ride in formation, the caravan casting long shadows over the earth. Each step of the camel is a gentle squelching, sigh, a slow rhythm that presses time itself into the ground. The sun hangs low, swollen and gold, kissing everything with farewell warmth. It's the last stretch, the return leg of your noble adventure, less glamorous than departure, less urgent than the journey to the oasis, but strangely sacred. This is the time for reflection, for gentle bellyaches from overeating spiced nuts, for sore thighs, for reminiscing about what you packed, what you lost, and how you will explain it all to your aunt without sounding like an amateur. Soft thunder walks evenly now. His earlier moods have passed, soothed by fresh water, a decent nap, and a handful of salted barley chews. You pat his neck, and he makes a noise that is either gratitude or the beginning of a poem. Shireen rides just ahead, her silhouette glowing at the edges. Her bath tent, now folded into dignified silence, sits behind her, on a donkey named Marble. Marble is moving with a kind of deliberate slowness that says, I could go faster, but I choose not to for philosophical reasons. The musicians are playing a soft piece now. Low strings, reed tones, something circular, something that repeats, like footsteps in the sand. It is not a melody meant for applause, but for breathing, for looking out at the horizon and realizing you are very small and very lucky. Even Merzad has relaxed. His sword is still on his hip, but his shoulders have dropped, and he's no longer scanning every bush like it insulted his ancestors. He's chewing something, possibly a dried date or the edge of his own patience. The priest has dozed off again, upright, on his camel, with a faint smile on his lips and one hand tucked into his sash like a philosopher posing for a statue. Historians rarely write about these parts. The afterglow of a journey, the soft return, the last hour when people stop trying to impress each other and just exist. When the goose finally stops squawking and just rides, eyes half-lidded, dreaming perhaps of ponds and faraway breadcrumbs. You take out your notebook, not the formal one, the one for inventories and distances and gift lists. The other one, the one filled with thoughts you'll pretend not to read later. You write down, flute gone, gave itself away, almond bowl, mysteriously emptied, sandal, migratory, nap, best yet. Then you add one final line, still. Had the towel, always the towel. It feels right. You glance over the dunes and catch a glimpse of your first landmark, the crooked rock that points home like a bent finger. It's close now. A few hours more and you'll be back in your quarters with real walls, a cedar-fragranced pillow, and a bath large enough to wash away your dignity in one long soak. But a part of you will miss this. Not the sand in your boots, or the low-grade camel drama, or even the nervousness about bandits. No, you'll miss the rhythm, the way each day stretched out like a scroll, waiting to be written on. The way you learned the shape of your companion's silences. The way time felt like something you could taste, salty, sweet, sometimes too dry, sometimes perfect. Ahead, someone calls a soft instruction. The caravan adjusts. You follow without thinking. Your body knows now. It has memorized this life, however briefly. As the last light begins to fade and the air grows cooler, you feel it, the weight of the desert exhaling. You do too. You sit taller. You adjust your scarf. You hold your towel a little tighter as, though it too has become a part of you, a symbol of something far more significant than linen. And for the first time in hours, you allow your thoughts to drift toward sleep, toward the dream you'll have tonight, of golden sand, rustling palms, and a goose who speaks in riddles, of a flute you didn't lose, but gave away, and of a day you carried everything you needed and somehow still returned lighter. And now, dear traveler, as the desert hushes and the journey folds itself like a well-worn map, it's time for you to rest. Let your breathing slow. Let your body feel soft and warm, as if wrapped in a robe of sand-warmed cotton. The stories of the day, the dusty wind, the too sweet dates, the curious goose, the sandal that wandered off, all drift behind you now, like footprints quickly, swallowed by the wind. Imagine you're still there, rocking gently atop your camel, watching the horizon melt into starlight. The sky above is wide and deep and ancient. You're safe, you're guided, you're wrapped in the quiet strength of travelers who came before, who napped under the same sky, whispered to the same wind, dreamed the same sunlit dreams. You've packed everything you needed. You carried more than you knew, and now it's enough. Let the night cradle you gently. Let the hush of desert evening fill your ears. Let each breath feel like a cool breeze against warm cheeks. Tomorrow, there will be roads. But tonight, there is only rest. Soften your eyes, loosen your thoughts, and sleep, sweet traveler, sleep.